the survivors of the Bering expedition with their furs. The news of the Alaskan otter furs and their value had spread all through eastern Siberia among the Promushlanese. The Cossacks, Emil Kosov, appears to have been the first to have attempted an expedition to Komandorsky Island. He, in 1743, the very next year, he formed a partnership, and they fitted out with Serebrennikov, who was a merchant and who continued in the trying to into the Alaska fur trade. They reached Bering Island, and they came back the next spring to Kamchatka with a rich cargo of sea otter and other pelts. Another second expedition in 1745 reached Copper Island, and they succeeded in collecting 1,600 sea otter, 2,000 fur seal, and 2,000 blue fox skins. Basov made 2 more voyages to the Komandorsky. Commander Lieutenant Lebedev, commander of the post at Bolsherets in Kamchatka, also founded an expedition. Lebedev was one of the founders of one of the rival companies later to the Russian-American company. They were first on the scene, but not as well organized. He reached the near islands, the outermost islands in the Aleutian Islands. And of course, being part of the Aleutian chain, they were inhabited by the Aleuts. They included islands Attu, Agatu, and others, but the natives chased him off, except on Attu, and then the trouble arose since the Russians commandeered the Aleut women. The Aleut men attacked them, and the Russians massacred all of the Aleut males in the village. The name of the bay there is still called Massacre Bay because of that. On the return voyage, the vessel was wrecked off Kraginsky Island near Kamchatka coast, and 12 of the crew were drowned. In 1749, Empress Elizabeth issued a ukaz making one of the Cossacks, Nevodchikov, with the master of the Imperial Navy, to oversee the collection of the tribute in furs from the newly. However, the government took no active part other than saying we want to collect our 10%. And at that time, there were no adequate maps, and most of the people who were sailing had no idea how to draw up a map anyway. So, but they knew directions, and between the wars, the War of the Spanish Succession and other wars, and the fact that Empress Elizabeth was a very conservative empress, not at all following in the idea of Peter the Great of getting European and skilled specialists, scientists, and others to help. Nothing very much was done. And of course, the government in Siberia was very scattered. You know, they would send out a commander to take part of a district. They didn't know how large it was. They didn't set up a communications channel. Some report took 7 years to go from one post to another, including some of the reports of Bering's voyage. Actually, it took 7 years for the reports to go from Yakutsk to Moscow. It was considerably later. It was almost 15 years, I think, after the actual voyage. Anyway, Siberia was, of course, a land of exiles and adventurers, and the Promushleniki, who were just as more content to raid the people who caught furs than to go to the trouble of actually trapping the furs themselves in all cases. There was no real organization in that. Alcoholism and was very prominent, partly because they, many of the people had been exiled there, and they had no real clue about how to make a living on the frontier. Anyway, between 1750 and 1775, each year, anywhere from 6 to a dozen ships went to the islands. There's very little records of actually how much was collected, how much furs what were carrying it. They did, of course, the Promushlenikis' custom of raiding rather than trading for furs ran into trouble. The Aleuts learned to fight back, and most serious fighting took place on Umnak and Unalaska Island between 1762 and 1766. In 1762, at least 5 Russian ships were in the eastern Aleutians. The Aleuts decoyed, lured the Promushleniki back into the hills and ambushed them and destroyed all of the ships in the eastern Aleutians except one. They not only wiped out the crews, and then the return of a Russian vessel from the discovery of the island of Kodiak prevented the Aleuts from achieving complete victory. And of course, it meant that the Russian took revenge, butchering large numbers, decimating the population of the Aleutians at that time. Essentially, for reasons of revenge, they embarked on a genocidal campaign. There are stories about tying together a bunch of prisoners and holding a gun to the chest of one and seeing how far the bullet would travel through the body. Stories. It's very difficult to put the story together. But Father Benyaminov, who became the bishop in later days, did gather as much, and it's very long story. So, the first meeting of the Russians with the natives of Kodiak was not promising. A few of the natives paddled out, but the Aleut interpreter would not converse with them because the Kodiak people were not Aleuts.